Hello and welcome to the PFF Live Q&A. I'm Doug Kyde, joined as always by Brad Spielberger. Brad, how are you doing today?
Doing well. It's a lot of more games in the book, a lot of good games continuing to come through. And I think tonight's big NFC East matchup. We know the NFC East doesn't give us a boring game. So Cowboys-Eagles should be good tonight.
For sure. Ari could not make it today, but we will be back actually on Thursday for another PFF Live Q&A, and Ari will be there for that one. Let's get first into the biggest news so far today. We will get into KJ Hamler's injury in a little bit, but let's talk about the CJ Henderson trade between the Panthers and the Jaguars. The Jaguars received a third-round pick and tight end Dan Arnold, and the Panthers received CJ Henderson and a 2022 fifth-round pick. CJ Henderson was rumored to be on the trade block this summer. Took a little bit longer than maybe some people expected for CJ Henderson excuse me, to get traded. But certainly an interesting deal, trading a top 10 pick 1 year after he was taken.
Yeah, this is a surprising development, even though it's the Jacksonville Jaguars, and you can go back and look at their list of top 10 picks, and it looks a lot like this, unfortunately. But to trade a top 10 pick a year after taking him, the Jaguars have already paid about 2/3 of his entire rookie contract already. The Panthers take on about $7 million over 3 years for a really good man coverage corner out of Florida. New defensive coordinator in Jacksonville, Joe Cullen, has been in a lot of stops in his career, but it looks like he's going to run more cover three, kind of like that Seahawks system we always hear about. The Jaguars are third in cover three percentage of snaps on defense this season, right around 40% of snaps. So Henderson was kind of the odd man out, but there's no way to look at this besides a win for Carolina. They lose J.C. Horn, this year's 8th overall pick, and get last year's 9th overall pick at corner. So when when Horn gets back in the fold, gets healthy, they have a young pair of stud corners that, if things bounce back for Henderson, he has had injury issues and other issues keeping him away from the football field. But if that clears up, this should be a slam dunk win for Carolina.
Also, certainly helps them in the future with J.C. Horn and C.J. Henderson both in their defensive backfield. 2 first-round picks in there, so that'll certainly be good for them moving forward. But yeah, to be able to replace Horn with Henderson like this, definitely a good thing for the Panthers. And for the Jaguars, yeah, sometimes there's this little bit of a reset when you bring in a new regime. You don't expect to trade away a top 10 pick for a tight end and a third-round pick a year later, but if that's what they have to do to get some value out of a guy that maybe they didn't value as highly as the last regime, then that's certainly what they will do. Let's get into the KJ Hamler injury. It's been reported that he tore his ACL. I believe it was Adam Schefter of ESPN who reported that. Broncos are dealing with some really bad injury luck at wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy with the high ankle sprain. Now KJ Hamler out for the season with the torn ACL. So they were lucky or fortunate to have some good wide receiver depth coming into the season. They've got Courtland Sutton, obviously, still as a starter. Tim Patrick has now risen up from, the third or fourth receiver spot up to number 2. But then now you're talking about a guy like Deontay Spencer, at least in week 3, getting a lot of time in the slot when KJ Hamler goes down. So something that was definitely a position of strength for the Broncos entering the season, and even in the summer, they traded away Trinity Benson. Now becomes a little bit of a weakness for them here moving forward, and not a great thing for Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback.
Yeah, they're a great example of, why teams can be smart. And we talked on this show about a potential Bryce Callahan trade. It was pitched as more teams calling Denver, not Denver shopping or anything like that. But this goes to show exactly why teams are patient and don't make moves like that, even though I think we, promote it more often than it happens because, like you mentioned, they trade away one receiver in Trinity Benson to the Detroit Lions, get a 5th-round pick, a nice trade, but now they're down 2, stud, first-round pick in Jerry Jeudy, 2nd-round pick in KJ Hamler, and they're now looking to replace those guys. But still 3-0, have the best point differential in all of football at plus 50, shut out the Jets this week. And look, Bradley Chubb, a top 5 pick, edge rusher, also out for an extended period of time with an injury. So they'll find a way to get through it. Both sides of the ball have a lot of talent at a lot of spots. I guess they also lost, Josie Jewell, linebacker. They've had a lot of injuries on this team. Mm-hmm. And yes, the strength of schedule has been the easiest so far in the NFL, but they are winning, in dominant fashion.
Sure. We've got another question here. Edith asks, thoughts on Robert Woods? I actually touched on Robert Woods, I think a few weeks ago when we were talking a little bit about fantasy, but, just from the LA Rams perspective, it's obvious why you're asking about Robert Woods, because they are spreading the ball around a lot there in LA. Cooper Kupp, clearly the number one receiving option in that offense, but then you've also got Robert Woods, Van Jefferson, Deshaun Jackson, even a tight end like Tyler Higbee really isn't getting a lot of production there because they're focusing so heavily on Cooper Kupp. But really the way that I see this moving forward, I know that I said this a little bit a few weeks ago, is that Cooper Kupp is going to be the mainstay in the offense. He's going to be working from the slot. He's the one who's going to be getting the most targets from Matthew Stafford. But then I really do see a rotation there at those two outside spots between Woods, Van Jefferson, and Deshaun Jackson. We really saw a big game from Deshaun Jackson this week. I think that, we saw a big game from Van Jefferson in week one. I think that Robert Woods' time will come. It's just going to be extremely difficult to predict when that actually happens, because there is that rotation and because they are so talented at that position.
Yeah, they're kind of like their competitors this weekend in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where I feel like every week in fantasy purposes, everyone's saying, is Mike Evans okay? Is Chris Godwin okay? Is this player okay? Look, they have 10 good receiving options on the team. I mean, they lost Cam Akers before the season. I'm sure he would have, taken some targets. They even have Darrell Henderson in this game and started Sonny Michel. Robert Woods is just going to be a guy that some games his job is going to be to block. He'll get the occasional carry. I think he had one or two against the Bucs, but that's just how this offense is going to roll. And we didn't even mention, Tutu Atwell, second round pick this year, a speedy, burner, is smaller. Maybe we'll have some time to adjust to the NFL game, but they are loaded and deep at that position. Van Jefferson starting to, emerge as a real player in that offense. And I think you mentioned too, Higbee kind of going underrated. They use him in a lot of ways I think we're used to seeing Robert Woods too. He had 3 huge screen catches in this game. One was a pivotal third down. He converted on first down and screen catch. Another one in the red zone, almost scored on it. So that's something that Robert Woods usually gets. A lot of those end arounds and screens and things behind the line of scrimmage. Higbee's now doing that as well. And Woods is doing his job and showing up, but there's a lot of options in that offense.
Let's talk about some of the 3-0 teams right now, because there are kind of some surprise teams that still are undefeated this season in the AFC. The Las Vegas Raiders and the Denver Broncos, both 3-0. I don't think many people were predicting them to have a better record than the LA Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs. And then in the NFC, you've still got the Rams, the Cardinals, and the Carolina Panthers at 3-0. Let's do it this way. Which team are you most convinced is real that's 3-0? And which team do you see a precipitous downfall from as the season goes along here?
Yeah, I think the Rams are the most legitimate team, and you could poke holes in probably any of these 3 teams and look at the opponents and stuff like that. But the Rams had a pretty convincing win against Tampa Bay Buccaneers this past weekend, and so that is the best win, in my opinion, of that group. I like what I've seen from Arizona. I do think I underestimated that their D-line is so good and their front seven is so good that even though their secondary has a lot of question marks, it's good enough to cover it up. But I also think we haven't really seen them play, a true solid passing offense. Tennessee Titans are starting to play some good football, but that offensive line was really injured in week one, got just dominated by the Cardinals. So we didn't even get to see them kind of throw to A.J. Brown, throw to Julio Jones. So I'm still waiting to see Arizona play a true passing offense, and we know their division will offer a few games there. But the Rams are legit. I think they are a contender in the NFC. They are fragile with injuries at certain spots, but if they stay healthy, I think them and the Bucs should be the favorite out of the NFC.
Yeah, I think the Rams are the most complete team out of this whole group that's 3-0. It's got the best combination of a best offense and defense, good special teams in there as well, really well coached. So they're the team that you might have been able to predict heading into the season that, okay, maybe the Rams could start off 3-0, even though they did have a little bit of a tougher schedule. There are certainly some surprises in there. I would say that this might be recency bias, or maybe I'm influenced too much by the KJ Hamler injury, but the Broncos at 3-0, I'm not quite as convinced. And you could say that about really the rest of these teams other than the Rams. I mean, the Raiders, I think, have gotten pretty fortunate early in the season. They've played some close games. They've beat some good teams, but them starting off at 3-0, I certainly wasn't expecting. The Cardinals, you hit on that nicely, that, they look legit at this point, but you do have to kind of wonder about the quality of competition. And then the Panthers, I don't think that anyone really expected Sam Darnold to be leading the Panthers to a 3-0 record at this point. And the injury to Christian McCaffrey can definitely hurt them, and the injury to J.C. Horn could definitely hurt them as well. But I think that, they certainly put together a good defense, and if the offense can keep up, then I could see them being legit as well. Let's talk about some of the surprise 1-2 teams as well. And I'm curious to get your thoughts specifically on the Chiefs, because I really don't think many people are expecting them to start off the season 1-2. But defense hasn't really played up to par this season so far. And I think I touched on this a little bit heading into the year. They've got the best quarterback in the NFL in Patrick Mahomes. They've got two great receiving weapons in Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. But what do they do if Kelce or Hill or both get taken out of the offense? And we're seeing that to some degree so far this season, where Tyreek Hill has really been taken out of the offense a little bit the last 2 weeks, and they just haven't had that third guy in the offense to be able to step up where needed. So I don't know if this is going to plague them all season, but I saw it being an issue heading into the year, and it's kind of starting to show itself early as well.
100%. The Hill note is hugely important. I mean, the last 2 weeks, he has 70 receiving yards. You have to go back to his rookie season in 2016. The last time he had less than 70, that amount of receiving yards over 2 weeks. So it is the worst 2-week stretch for him in terms of receiving yards since his rookie season. So defenses are keying in on those two guys, like you said. And I think the other thing, too, is that teams have realized how much of a juggernaut Kansas City is. And so they're playing them like they understand they have to find every margin of victory. Even their one win against the Browns score first. They go for 2 right away on the first possession of the game to go up 8-0. Like, teams are doing things against this team that they know they have to in order to win this game. So the Chargers, obviously a lot of controversy there. Should they have ran the clock down to 1 second and kicked the field goal? Probably the smarter decision there. But you can tell the wheels are churning with every team that plays against them. We have to do unorthodox things to beat this football team. I also think, look, the offensive line will get better. They will gel, but they're starting 5 new players on that offensive line at every single spot. Orlando Brown really hasn't been great so far. In Kansas City, there were some question marks there. If the Ravens are willing to move on and not pay him that big money, maybe is there a reason that's the case? And then, the defense. I mean, these are things we've pointed out all offseason long, is the defense is fragile. And now you have injuries to Frank Clark and Chris Jones. And then the third receiving option. They did not address that third receiving option. They did go after a bunch of different guys in free agency, apparently made Juju Smith-Schuster an offer, a bunch of other guys they head into camp or, head in for a visit. They might need to make a trade or make a move there to get Mahomes a legitimate third passing option, because defenses seem to have figured something out so far.
Yeah, I mean, even losing Sammy Watkins in that role hurts you when you get down to Mecole Hardman and Byron Pringle and all of these guys. I mean, Sammy Watkins is a legitimate starting NFL wide receiver. I know that he hasn't been quite as good in recent years as he was when he was in Buffalo, but yeah, that's actually that was kind of a sneaky big loss for them. Real quick again on the 1-2 teams, we've got Lawrence Dillon asking, should Seattle sell the house and rebuild? I think it's still a little bit early for that. They obviously beat the Colts in week 1, had a close game with the Titans in week 2. A little bit concerning that they struggled against the Vikings on Sunday, but as long as you got Russell Wilson in there, obviously they've got a good offense. They've got good offensive pass catchers. The defense, I think, it's just certainly not the same group that they had back in the Legion of Boom years. And, they carried over so many pieces for so many years from that group. But now Bobby Wagner is really the last man standing in there now that KJ Wright's gone and everything. That I do think that that's another team that, do they look to try to bring in Richard Sherman? Do they look to try to fix that secondary a little bit? Because even Trey Flowers said after the game, he was asked about his performance in week 3, and he said, I think that you guys expect me to be Richard Sherman. And quite frankly, that's a lofty comparison to try to live up to, especially when you're talking about Richard Sherman from 2011, 2012, 2014, those years. No, I don't think that Seattle should be selling the house and rebuilding, but it's a tough division, and they can't dig themselves out of too deep of a hole. So they definitely have to start getting rolling here.
Yeah, I mean, the defense is very concerning, and they have some good offenses still left to play this year, and their cornerback situation is just not good. And for them to even trade away Ahkello Witherspoon to the Pittsburgh Steelers before the season, obviously they thought they had better options internally, but clearly just not set at that position at really any point. Didn't have any draft capital this year. Had the fewest picks of any team in the NFL. Their earliest pick, Dwayne Eskridge at wide receiver, barely plays. So, I mean, they had a bad offseason, and they lost a lot of talent. And you mentioned that Legion of Boom defense. I think the coverage guys there in the secondary was the name for a reason, and they're remembered for a reason. But they also had guys like Michael Bennett, up front getting pressure.
Sure.
And now you have, Alton Robinson and Darrell Taylor, who looks like a good sophomore, second round pick last year, didn't play. Like there's some talent there. But when you have LJ Collier, their first round pick last year, is a healthy scratch so far. Jordan Brooks at linebacker, their first round pick last year. He's a player. He's not really like changing the game. Like they just really have struggled with those first round picks the last couple of years, and it's finally starting to show its face.
We did want to talk about the rookie quarterbacks as well. So TT has a question here. Is Fields trash? No, I certainly don't think that Justin Fields is trash, but was it maybe a slightly concerning performance on Sunday, but it certainly wasn't helped out by the offensive line as well. Sacked 9 times. I think that they allowed something like 15 or 16 quarterback hits officially. I haven't checked the PFF data right now for how many times he was pressured and hit, but it was a ton. It was, the majority of his dropbacks back there, he was under siege. But yeah, let's talk about the rookie quarterbacks in general. I got a really good look at Mac Jones since that was one of the games that was locally broadcast here. He threw 3 interceptions, which is something that we haven't seen him turn the ball over like that yet. And I would say that one of them was dropped and bobbled by Jonnu Smith. One of them came when he was hit while throwing. And then the last one looked like a little bit of a miscommunication between him and Nelson Aguilar. So Mac Jones was our highest graded rookie quarterback on Sunday. He's the highest graded rookie quarterback overall this season. But I don't know. I think there could be some early cause for concern with some of these guys. They just, maybe not long-term, but I think that we expected someone like Trevor Lawrence to be playing at a higher level this season. I think that we expected even, Zach Wilson to be playing at a higher level so far. Trevor Lawrence, for example, was kind of a popular low QB1, high QB2 in fantasy, and no one should be starting Trevor Lawrence at this point when he's throwing, 7 interceptions so far. So what's, I guess, just your level of concern for the quarterbacks? I'm sure that you got a much better look at Justin Fields on Sunday as well.
In theory, I guess I did, but I don't know if in practice I did. I mean,
right.
Apparently Andy Dalton and Justin Fields are the same quarterback. At least, that's the perception in Chicago, that you should use them the same.
Interchangeable.
No rollouts. Yeah. No play action, a ton of shotgun. The thing though is the biggest concern with him coming out of college was he holds onto the ball too long. We saw Mike Renner talk about that a bunch in his draft coverage, and 7 of those 9 sacks yesterday came after he'd held the ball for over 4 seconds. So, on 46 dropbacks, he was sacked 7 times after holding the ball way too long. And look, he didn't lose him that game. The scheming was embarrassing. The offensive line we know is not good, and they played like it yesterday. But he can't hold the ball on that long. It's never going to work regardless of the situation. Zach Wilson's the same thing. His average time to throw this year is at 3 seconds, and that offensive line, which I thought would get better this year, has been awful. So as crazy as this sounds, Trevor Lawrence for me right now is the most concerning because, yes, it's Jacksonville, but their offensive line is not that bad. They do have a ton of weapons. None of them are, premier number 1 guys, but they have a lot of auxiliary weapons. And he is leading the NFL in turnover-worthy plays. He has 9 of them. Next highest is 6. He also has 5 of those when he's not pressured. So he's almost ahead of everyone else in turnover-worthy plays without pressure compared to everyone else, in all circumstances. So Trevor Lawrence is concerning. I mean, he's made some nice plays as well. He showed why he's Trevor Lawrence, but he is not excelling and really just making a lot of unforced errors, a lot of uncharacteristic mistakes that aren't as – you can't blame the situation as much as I think you can with the other guys.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it is interesting because heading into, the draft even, Trevor Lawrence was clearly regarded as the number 1 overall quarterback, but his accuracy rate in college actually wasn't really up to the same level as someone like Mac Jones and someone like Justin Fields. And it seems like, some of it's decision-making, some of it's accuracy, the turnovers that he's had this season. But I would probably agree with you that he's not in as disadvantageous of a situation as someone like Justin Fields was, or like Zach Wilson has been. With Justin Fields, it's an interesting case as well, because I watched a ton of Justin Fields when he was coming out of Ohio State. And I think that everyone expected him to be a better or more willing running quarterback simply because of his athleticism and size and build and everything. But he was really a pocket passer at Ohio State. And you almost hate to say this because in the NFL, you want him to be mostly a pocket passer, but there might be times when Matt Nagy has to push him to run a little bit more. When he's standing in the pocket for 4 seconds trying to find a receiver who's open, those are the times then he might want to use that 4.4 speed and get out of the pocket more often rather than taking sacks or taking pressures. So that might be hard for him to fix. And then obviously they might want to readjust after that, but that is something that could certainly benefit him in Chicago, is to maybe use his legs a little bit more. But absolutely, the play calling was pretty bizarre that they really wanted to keep the same playbook in place for him and Andy Dalton. And I'm sure that some people are wondering if Chicago's kind of intentionally trying to hamstring him since they're so intent on starting Andy Dalton. I don't think that it's anything like that. But it was certainly strange to see out of him. But I think that these rookie quarterbacks should play better moving forward. But the fact that we haven't seen that clear upward trajectory at this point tells me that it could definitely be a season of growing pains for them this year.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the one, too, in the best situation might be Mac Jones. And still, the offensive line is not really playing up to the preseason expectations. I saw Steve mention he's 6 of 22 on 10-plus yard passes downfield. Yep. So he's just like, the receivers are not getting open deep, and he's not able to stretch the field. And I think defenses are kind of collapsing in on them a bit. There's still plenty of time. We're not trying to overreact to 3 weeks of action, but I'm with you. I mean, when you have a class that is held in this high of a regard, you'd like to at least kind of see upward trajectory and things of that nature. And I'm not sure we are so far.
For sure. Well, that will do it for this week's PFF live Q&A. As I said earlier, we will likely be back on Thursday with Ari in here as well for us. On Thursday, we'll get a little bit more into week 4 because there are certainly some intriguing matchups. I will be in Foxborough for the Buccaneers-Patriots game. I'm sure that will kind of dominate headlines, but plenty more for us to watch coming up in week 4. So follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyde, and we will catch you guys on Thursday. Also, just go to pff.com for all of your NFL needs, analysis, fantasy, news, everything. Head to PFF.